Welcome. We are here today to discuss creating and implementing a social story. I've heard that you have a student in your classroom that is having some difficult behaviors?
Yes. John will not do anything. He doesn't stop yelling out answers, talks over people, and when reminded to raise his hand he gets upset and hits his desk. If I ignore him he gets out of his seat and gets louder.
What is the behavior that John is displaying that you want to change?
Calling out answers. I think it will decrease or extinguish some of the other behaviors.
We can use a social story to help John stop calling out answer. When you use a social story, you want to specifically define the targeted behavior.
For example, when John calls out in class, it makes it hard for the other students to learn.
Even if you feel you know what triggers John's behavior and how often it occurs, it is important to take data for 3 to 5 days, specifically looking for any trends.
There are many different data sheets available to take data in a way that fits your classroom. My data shows that John calls out 10 times during a 30-minute lesson. With visual reminders he continued to call out. When I told him to stop, he became very frustrated. After 2 to 3 reminders, John began hitting and kicking his desk.
When you begin to write your social story, write it so the student will read it as a first-person narrative. The story should contain descriptive, directive, and perspective sentences. A descriptive sentence tells where situations occur, who is involved, what they are doing and why.
For example, during class, we learn many new things. My classmates and I have many questions.
Next, your social story needs a perspective sentence. This describes the reactions and feelings of other people.
When I yell out my answers and do not raise my hand, it makes the other students angry.
Finally, your story needs a directive sentence. A directive sentence tells the student what to do.
When I want to say something during class, I will raise my hand and wait for my teacher. When my teacher calls on me, I can ask my question. How many of each sentence type do I need?
For every one directive sentence, remember, that tells the student the behavior you want to see. You should have 2 to 5 descriptive or perspective sentences. The length of your story and the amount of sentences on a page depend on the level of your student.
When do I read the story?
The goal is for the student to be able to read the story themselves with very little assistance. You should sit with your student and read it prior to when you expect to see the behavior.
John talks out during lessons, therefore I should read the story prior to beginning my lesson. What about visuals in the story?
Photographs, hand-drawn illustrations, or pictorial icons can help aid in your student's understanding. You know your student and know if he will be distracted by visuals.
How often do I use the social story?
I know there are many time constraints, but it is important to use the story consistently. If the behavior is taking time away from the class, why not take 5 minutes and read it prior to the lesson in which the behavior often occurs?
Along with the story, I think it would be good to pair it with other behavior techniques. Just like any other tool, it works best in conjunction with more strategies. Modeling the correct behavior is important.
Yes. To model the behavior you want to see from John, you could work with John to show him how when he raises his hand to get the teacher's attention.
As time progresses, wait longer and longer prior to calling on John.
After reading the story, you should check for understanding. You can do that by having specific and planned out questions at the end of the story. Make up questions when you are done or have the student write out sentences. You want a valid answer, so again, make the questions individualized so the student can answer as close to independent as possible.
John, do you have questions during class? Do your classmates have questions? What do you do when you have a question? Do you raise your hand then call out?
You want to have questions and sentences to check understanding but also increase the student's memory of the correct behavior.
I should also continue to take data while we use the story. If the story is ineffective, maybe the targeted behavior needs to be altered or the story needs to be made more appropriate for the student's cognitive level.
After a few weeks, review your data and look for any trends. Program maintenance and generalization, such as time between readings of the social story, may gradually be increased. The teacher may need to assist the student in generalizing the skill to other situations.
Every student is different, and so the guidelines we have provided are important but are just a framework. Individualizing your stories for each student and each behavior is important. There are many great pre-written stories available throughout the internet. Even so, it is up to you to make the story important to the student so that it has their attention.
Thank you for sharing your time with us, and good luck using social stories in your classroom.